Okay, good morning, colleagues. I think we are now quorate, so we can start. This is Council of Governors meeting for CCAM, held in public, February 2026. May I make some first introductions? Firstly, I want to welcome a number of new governors. Mr. Tay, over there, Mr. T. Very pleased to have you here today. We met earlier in the week. Do you want to introduce yourself, or are you happy just to? Yeah, yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you. And also Frank Doyle, our new governor as well. Very pleased to see you here today. Thank you for committing the time. I should also say, on a sad note, this is Lee's last meeting of the governors. You stepped down after 6 years of impeccable service. You were lead governor for a year or 18 months. I can't remember, really. 2 years, 3 years? Okay. Well, Lee, I'm very grateful. You know, we've worked together and I really do appreciate your support, and I know my predecessors did. And as normal, you'll still be around CCAM as a community. Yeah, no. So we're not saying goodbye. It's just one stage on in your CCAM career as such. But it's my great pleasure to do the honourable thing of giving you the shield. Thank you. There are some absences today. Kirsty isn't with us, and a number of our non-executives have sent their apologies. Karen, in particular, is on, Liz is on leave, and that is well-deserved leave. I do apologise. I'm not particularly happy with this level of non-executive non-attendance. I will be raising this with non-executives because council is an important meeting and we should be better represented. So Karen and I will take that away, but my apologies. I am grateful to Karen, who's on screen. I mean, Karen has just undergone some surgery, so it's very good of her to be here today, and she's going to cover the QPS report. Howard is going to cover the Finance and Investment Committee. And also, Karen, yet again, is going to cover the People Committee report. Karen will do those particular responsibilities, but will then leave us, and that is quite understandable. But thank you, Karen, for being here today on that basis. Can I just check there are no declarations of interest that people wish to raise? I'm not hearing any, so thank you. Minutes from the previous meeting, are colleagues content with those, please? Okay, I will assume that's fine. And then the action log. All the actions are up to date. There is one here relating to the NHS EQI. That is a particular case that I don't want to discuss in public, but we will give an update under Simon's chief executive report. There are two other actions, but they're due for the June meeting. So if I could move on from there, Simon, your update, please, your verbal update.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael. Morning, everyone. The first thing, welcome. Good to see new colleagues joining us. The second thing is I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Lee for his service as a governor, but also as a CFR. I've had the privilege of going along to a couple of the local events, which are amazing, and the community, it really embodies the spirit of what a CFR is all about. He and his team, I know he would say he is part of a team, and only can do what he does because of all the people who support him, and long may that continue. So thank you, Lee. So the first thing I think to say is we meet obviously near the end of February, but that means we're now reflecting on where we've got to over winter thus far. Winter probably really ends for us in formal terms at the end of March. That's when the NHS normally switches off its winter planning arrangements. And so far throughout winter, I have to say CCAM has held up well. And I want to immediately pay tribute to all the staff, all the support staff, everybody who works so hard to get an ambulance out there, and all of our CFRs, all of our emergency responders, may I say as well, who have performed so exceptionally over the winter period. I'll come back to this. Activity year on year is actually up. It's up 3% in category 2, 7% in category 1 when we look at December figures. So we know that we're delivering improvements in the context of increased activity. Our performance in both category 1 and category 2 improved over that which we were in 2025. That's a huge effort, and I'll talk in a minute, as I said, about the year ahead. But it's a real tribute to everybody in the organisation that I'm able to sit here and report that to you this morning. It's also really important, because this is a meeting in public, that I pay tribute to and thank our partners. Despite all of the challenges that the NHS has faced, we are blessed with colleagues, particularly in our acute trust, who have worked really hard to help maintain our handover times. Handover times often get commented upon nationally at times during winter, and ours have continued to hold up. So I just wanted to take a moment and actually acknowledge the contribution of all of our acute trust colleagues in particular, who have helped us keep ambulances out there serving patients. We couldn't do it without them too. This year, this point in the year, there are two things further to update upon. The first is, obviously this is the point in the year where we start to round up the year, the end of the year, and we start to look forward. So as we look forward to the end of the year, we are judged fundamentally on two high-level groups of metrics. The first is, are we confident that we will deliver to our performance trajectory as agreed with the National Ambulance team? And I'm pleased to say we remain on track to do that. The second thing is, are we on track to deliver the money? And we remain on track to do both of those things for the end of March. Had I been offered those things at the start of the year, I would have taken them. We now obviously are also looking forward. So as I meet with you, as when we're reporting to you this morning, we've just submitted our financial and operational plan for the year ahead. We are in a position where I'm able to say that we've submitted a compliant plan to national planning requirements. That will be a not inconsiderable challenge for the organisation in the year ahead, because we have to continue to make progress against the headwinds of three challenges that the government has set us. The first and the most important is to continue to improve response times for patients. So we will outturn the year roughly at about 28 and a half minutes. Next year's challenge is to get that back to 25. Again, that will require both our efforts, and in particular our efforts around improving our virtual care offer, but it will also require community efforts as well to make sure that our services, the services that we need to send people to, are available in the community as and when we need them. Not only do we have to improve the response time, we also have to continue to make headroads into our overdraft. We have improved our financial position. Howard will talk more about this in due course as we head towards the end of the year. But the government's medium-term challenge for performance by the time we meet the general election timetable, get back to 18 minutes for money, get back to a balanced position. And we have to do both of those things with no real cash uplift in terms of meeting demand. We get funding increases to pay people increments, but we don't get funding to meet the increased demand that I touched on a moment ago. So that, as you can see, is going to be a tricky set of issues to navigate during the year ahead. I am confident that we have a plan, and we have a plan that is deliverable. We have secured for the second year, the additional national ambulance funding. We have new vehicles coming on stream during this year ahead, and we also have the opportunity to further our collaboration with SCAS, and I'm pleased to report that in that space we have just recently gone over the line in terms of procuring a joint CAD, our dispatch system, which is the first enabling action in terms of having a common system by which we send crews out to see patients. That would be an amazing achievement to pull off. It starts now, it will come into view next year, but as with always with these decisions, the run-in is significant, and I'm grateful to the support of everybody who has made that possible. So, a lot, I think, to be pleased and proud about as we head through to the end of this year. A lot to do in the year ahead. As ever, I personally remain glad and grateful for the support of the board, also executive colleagues who work exceptionally hard in terms of the service that they deliver, and I feel that we can go into the year ahead with some confidence. Thank you.
Put the wrong one. No, that's fine. Firstly, before I open it to questions, can I reiterate what Simon says? Some of you will know that my background is in finance, and I'll obviously leave Howard to talk shortly. But unlike a lot of trusts, we are in a fairly good position financially, to end the year as we have been outlined to you, and also to submit a balanced plan. I think is a significant achievement, which is not common across the NHS at the moment. We are very clear, though, as a board, that implementing that plan will be challenging, and that is something that, as a board, and we have been focusing on particular. But I would say on behalf of the non-executive community, we really support what the executive have done to get us to this very good position. So my tremendous thanks to Simon. But I'd like to open it up to questions. We will go through each of the quality patients, people and financial reports, but is there anything that you'd like to ask of Simon at this particular point? Martin, please.
Yeah, I pushed it. Can you hear me? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's congratulations, really, isn't it? I mean, to achieve on the performance and on the finance. I was just interested in one of the reports. It mentioned that we had stuff to learn from SCAS in terms of the development of care pathways, because obviously from the strategy point of view, the big problem, which I think was obvious to anybody who's been around in ambulance well for a long time, was would the system actually deliver in terms of acceptance rates at urgent care centres and so on. And I mean, we're running at 17% versus 60%, but it's this comment, rather than focusing on that, it's the comment about SCAS have more developed pathways. Is that to do with their ICBs and the extent to which their ICBs are better at delivering? You may wish to package this in a more politically acceptable way, but their ICBs are better at delivering on what they agree to than perhaps certain ones in Surrey, Sussex and Kent are.
Thank you for the question, Martin. I think the interesting way of reflecting on that question is to look at the analysis that the clinicians have done, and I think it would be instructive at a future COG for people to see some of that clinical analysis. I think what's remarkable is across a range of different domains, despite the fact that we do something that is essentially very similar, it is delivered in quite different ways. The differences are both internal and external, and there are a range of different pieces of analysis that have been done that compare us internally. But the point that you're making there is we've also looked at what pathways exist in the community, and it is demonstrably the case that SCAS have more of those pathways developed than we do. And I, sitting here right now, I can't give you a a good or full answer as to why that has happened. It has clearly taken place over multiples of years. It's not an immediate issue that we have dealt with. I would also say I think there's a significant opportunity. I was really pleased to read our new ICB chair for Surrey and Sussex, and just to remind colleagues that Surrey and Sussex, as the ICBs change, and Surrey and Sussex ICBs formally merge and become one organisation on the 1st of April, they will take on commissioning responsibility for the whole of the South East, so all of the 6 ICBs as will be then. I was also really pleased to read the fact that the incoming chair designate, Ian Smith, had already been out on a shift on one of our ambulances, and actually he reflected back in his feedback to me, which I've shared with some board colleagues, particularly Michael and Karen, precisely the point that you're making. So I think the opportunity is we are knocking at an open door. There is a recognition that more and different needs to be done. Not only are the ICBs coming together, but also the commissioners are coming together. So we have had 2 very different, very divergent commissioners up until now. And I think one of the challenges that we as an organisation and we and SCAS together need to take on is what does the future of an ambulance service across the South East look like, and what are our legitimate expectations of out-of-hospital pathways that should be developed. But Ian had extensive feedback. He went and sat with a number of our crews in the crew room and listened to them, and as you will, I'm sure, be aware, they were fulsome in telling him where the gaps were. So although you're absolutely right in your analysis, I think there is a big opportunity. Karen and I attended the committee in common a couple of days ago, and one of the things that Ian said as the incoming chair was one of the big things that he needs to deliver on is reducing the pressure on our services. So lots to do in that space, but I felt a sense of positivity around the conversation.
Could I just, well, I mean, from what I understood, the principal problem with the urgent care centres is their capacity to accept. There was a minor one about, not a minor one, but a secondary one about whether or not they think that they are appropriate to receive, but the major one seemed to be their capacity. Well, I mean, obviously there's a divergence of different sorts of pathways, but just taking that one, I mean, until the system increases the capacity of the urgent care centres to receive, we're always going to be battering our heads against a brick wall, aren't we? And there's got to come a point where we have to, well, have a conversation with them about what's actually practical, given the reality over time of them not being able to increase the capacity of their urgent care centres.
Capacity is one problem. You're absolutely right. Capacity fills up. There are colleagues in the room who probably live this more than I do, but capacity is one problem. So we often see things filling up during the day quite early. Also, hours of the day, days of the week. You know, we have demand that is consistent across the 24/7 period. Now, I'm not so foolish as to suppose that's where we'll be, but equally, we've got to do more. We've also got particular issues. Crews will report this to me regularly on my out and about visits around mental health patients and what the adequacy and the range of responses that we can offer to patients in mental health crisis would be another issue that I would want to highlight where I think we need to make further progress. Why is all of that important? I go back to the operational plan. Part of our ability to get back to 25 minutes and then from there to 18 minutes is of course dependent on solving the problem that you've just described.
Thank you, Martin. I'm sure we'll return to this, but could I now go to Paul, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your report. I wanted to pick up on something that Martin has said and something you said about the response of the ICBs. I think there is an issue within our own area about the way in which the ICB, now for Surrey and Sussex, and the ICB for Kent, respond to demands on their own work plans. And one of the things that is of interest, I noticed in one of the reports that the work that's being done on the response by CCAM to patients who are experiencing suicidal thoughts in Surrey and Sussex compared to the approach that is being taken in Kent. And it does say that there is work ongoing in Kent in order to bring the standards and the response up to the process which is used in Sussex and Surrey. I wondered if you could just give us an update on that work, when you expect it to be finished, and what kind of improvements you hope to see. Thank you.
So we know that in Kent there are quite divergent models of service depending on where you live in the county. So one of the things colleagues have been working on is how do we level up, and in particular what we're looking at is how can the mental health crisis cafes, because that's the best alternative we've got to a hospital setting, how can we make better use of them? That is not an immediate fix. To explore the problem for a second, the problem is that patients who we often come across are in the first stages of crisis, and it's often quite a significant crisis. Mental health crisis cafes, although that's the name, tend to work with patients who are at a lower level of amplitude. So we need to find a way through that conundrum, and that's the tricky part of the conversation. I can't give you a date right now, but I can go away and see where we are with it. But that's the shape of the problem that we're trying to solve. What we know for sure and certain is that taking a mental health crisis patient to hospital is not a good outcome unless that is the only viable and appropriate option. We've got to do more, goes back to Martin's point, about keeping people away from hospital. And the evidence is that there is more that we could do.
So, if I may just come back on, so it's really part of the virtual care, the way in which we're treating patients remotely to try and get support at that level when they don't.
No, both and is the answer to that question. So we know that we need to be able to expand. There'll be a mode that you'll hear me talk about, virtual first. We still send an ambulance to far too many people generically. So there is a generic opportunity for us to do better in that space. That's a really complicated and knotty problem, which would require a seminar in its own right to get into the detail of that. But that's one challenge. Within that, there will be a group of patients who've got lower level mental health problems who we can signpost to services. What I was actually referring to was patients who we see in a scene, who we go to and respond to with an ambulance. What is the alternative to taking them to hospital? That's the conundrum that I think you're picking up in that report.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, unless there are any other questions, we'll go into the main. Please, Andrew, yeah.
Simon, thank you very much for your report, but particularly the quite extraordinary case that we should have submitted our plans for next year, so much in ahead. I seem to remember it was sort of June before we were even asked for the submissions last year or something. But I wondered if you could give a view or give your understanding of where SCAS are. Are they in the same place with their submission, and do they have a fully costed and approved plan?
So we are obviously now, just to remind colleagues, working much more closely in partnership with SCAS as we head into closer collaboration in the year ahead. That again is a subject of a seminar session in its own right. To say tactically on their plan, so yes, they have submitted a compliant plan. Both of our plans are currently being assessed by the region and the National Ambulance team. We get an extra layer of oversight because ambulance services are a national resource, so the National Ambulance team will feed back to both of us. The two executive teams are working together on a range of opportunities. I described one of them, but there are numerous others where we could work more closely together. To be honest, I am less, I think next year will be next year, because already the die has been cast pretty much in that regard. What I'm really concerned that we should focus on is the year after next, and how do we position ourselves to meet that challenge, because the operational plans, although I kind of shorthanded it by saying next year, what we've also been asked to do is to provide 3-year plans. The first one has got detailed numbers in it. The second 2 years, it's about the narrative intent. And where I would be wanting to focus our efforts is in what does the collaboration deliver, not necessarily next year, though I think there are still significant opportunities to be prospected, but really come to fruition in 27, 28 and 28, 29. And that is the place that we should be thinking about, because too often the health service has found itself in the place of responding in a very short-term way. I think NHSE is rightly pushing us to take a much more strategic view of plans, and I hope that at future meetings I will be talking not just about 26, 27, which is obviously important, but 27, 28 and 28, 29, because the things that we do next year have to be now linked into that forward frame. But tactically, both organisations have met the planning requirements for this year.
And does these compliant plans include any synergies for the group model, or any plans that are enshrined within that?
Not yet, no. And that, I think, is an important position for us to be aware of. So the position we've taken in CCAM, the position that SCAS has taken, is that for next year we have to submit organisationally compliant plans and not assume that the group will deliver. I still think there is an opportunity to accelerate some of the potential opportunities that are in play. The good news about the collaboration is that because the ambulance sector has not prospected some of the opportunities that acute colleagues have, there's a huge amount of things to go after, just like a huge amount of things to go after. The issue is actually structuring and choosing the things that we would go after. The reason why we've gone for I'm looking at Paul here, the reason why we've gone for the kind of digital stuff first is because that's the key enabling action. Imagine if we had one patient system, we are able to have a much better conversation. And that enables so many other things to flow from that. But, just to give one other tiny example that shows it, for those who are in estates orientation, there's an opportunity for us to share our estates management system and have a common system across both organisations for that. And when you start to look at it, the opportunities are, legion, literally. So I think there's more to go at.
Thank you.
May I come in there? It's a really good question, Andrew, and I would say the next 6 months during the transitional arrangements as we move to a group are really, really fundamental, and it's important that we get that right so that we're in a position to begin to take no regrets decisions that deliver the benefits for patients and make better use of public money. As outgoing chair, that is the clear message that I have given to NHS England, and we need to maintain the focus on getting that transition right. But it's a very good question. Thank you very much. I'd now like to go into the main items. So as a board, we agree the priorities, and the priorities and the strategic focus help the non-executives in their different roles, the chairs of the various committees, to hold the executive to account. So what we always think it's useful is to start this session with reminding us about the strategic priorities, and we review these annually to make sure that our assurance focus is well targeted. And so, Howard, I think you're going to actually introduce that, because it's normally the chair of the audit committee, but Peter can't be here today. But Howard, I think you're going to say a few opening words in that place. So thank you very much.
So you wanted me to report on sort of audit committee? Yep.
It's really the audit committee the audit committee looks at the strategic priorities that we're focusing on, and that's broadly where I would be asking you to. It's setting the framework for the next 3 items on the agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can I just sort of cover off some of the key things coming out of the sort of audit report? Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So some of the levels of assurance that we have improved upon significantly over the last year are around the EPRR, Emergency Resilience Programme, where previously, you may recall, we had some fairly severe issues, and those have now been addressed, and we're in a very good position. Likewise, on policy management was a major issue for us and is now resolved largely, and we are well on top of that. So from those general governance point of view, we're in a much better position. Also, from an internal audit, we have seen so far this year all the reports being at least moderate assurance, and the latest 2 have shown substantial assurance, those covering station visits concerning medicines management and on financial systems, substantial assurance. So there's a very strong evidence here of an improvement in terms of these internal audit reports, whereas before there were a number that were below the line, but as I say, all those issued this year so far have been moderate assurance, and the most recent ones substantial assurance. So there's a very strong trend there. The other points are generally on risk management. Again, substantial improvements in that field as well, well evidenced, and on counter fraud, I think we're pretty well covered from that perspective as well. So overall, the sort of governance arrangements are on a very strong improving tack, basically. And there's a lot of evidence, both externally from independent internal audit, to evidence that improvement. So that's really what I wanted to cover on that, if that's okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Howard, and that's a very good summary. What I was really getting at is to bring the board's, the Council of Government's attention to the area of focus that the board is deliberately targeting going forward, and it's in the report that's come to you, which is around what Simon has emerged. How do we make sure that our virtual care is fully effective? We recognise that we need to do more in the workforce planning area, because our workforce is really key to the future of this organisation, and is also closely linked to our ability to live within our budget. The third issue is delivery. Simon has spoken very eloquently about our ability now to put forward a balanced budget for the next year, but the scrutiny that will go through will be our ability to give confidence that we can deliver on our core services to the public. And so as a board, we are very much focused on ensuring that that capability and capacity is in place and deployed effectively. And as is mentioned earlier, we are very much focusing on the transitional arrangements as the group is established. This is very key to the delivery of benefits going forward. So in addition to what Howard has said there, we are confident that the governance of the organisation is operating as intended and is giving assurance to the board. But as ever, we need to prioritise our focus, and that's very much where the preceding comments that I just made is very much where we will be looking over the next quarter. I give that as way of background really for the next three items, which will enable the council to hold the NEDs to account for the assurance that we're getting in the three areas of the quality of care that we deliver, how we support our people, and finally our partnership working and our financial sustainability. So if people are happy, I would ask Karen to come in on the quality of care and then also to pick up anything that relates to what Howard has just said. But please, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go. I'm not sure where my query sits, so maybe if I ask it now. I thought it sat along strategic priorities, but you will tell me, I guess. Local government reorganisation is probably the most significant change for local government, for 50 years. And I'm very keen to try and understand what the strategic position of the Trust is around local government reorganisation. There's a consultation out now which closes on the 26th of March for Kent and Medway. Surrey has already got its way forward, if you like. But listening to such things as reducing pressure on services, integrated services, prevention, all of those things, I think there is significant opportunity for CCAM in this area. So I was just interested around the strategic priorities. What is the position of the Trust, please? Thanks.
Thank you. Could I ask Simon to respond first? Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. The changes in local government are the biggest I've ever seen in my NHS career. And I think the first thing I'd say is they're occurring coincidentally with some of the biggest changes we've seen in the NHS commissioning landscape. And that change, I think, it absolutely presents an opportunity to which I'll come to in a minute. But the thing that is, keeps me awake at night is the risk of loss of grip. Over the next 18 months. I lived through the implementation of the Lansley reforms in the NHS. I know that didn't touch local government in the same way, though some functions did. Public health, for example, did move that way. And it was a real challenge. So I think the first thing I would want to call the Council's attention to is there is absolutely going to need to be an effort to continually engage during this period of transition so that we don't lose grip on the day-to-day and we don't lose grip on our strategic priorities. The second thing is we had deliberately set up a divisional structure and that divisional structure is absolutely about trying to focus on the needs of local communities. So not only do we have to do those things once across CCAM, but we have to do the things that local people, local communities need of us. So we will on the 1st of April fully implement our new divisional structure, which will reflect the Kent, Surrey, Sussex geographies that we currently have. And the expectation is that there will be divisional leadership teams in place who will start those conversations at a much more local level and be empowered to have the conversations about service responses that need to be developed at a local level. So when I talk about integration, I don't just mean it at a strategic level, I mean it at a local community level. Because as I go out and about around the place, our own crews tell me that, the world is very different if you sit in Thanet to where we are sitting here in Banstead. And we need to be able to respond to both. Common standards for sure, but one of the biggest things that I would draw attention to, for example, is the fact that we've got very rural areas in our patch and our response times differ through those rural areas. So one of the things that I will be doing in the year ahead is actually starting to develop differentiated performance reports. Because when you see me talk about things at an aggregate level, I'm talking about whole trust performance. But that's not how people experience the service. They experience it at their local community level. And we need to get more into that space. So that's our direction of travel. And you know, I need every piece of help I can get, final thing to say, in terms of trying to build the new relationships as the reorganisation happens, because it's the human relationships, as you know, that get things done or stop things from happening. So that's a flavour of the work that we're doing at the moment.
Could you please come back?
Thank you for that, and I totally agree. Have you taken the opportunity to be part of the consultation? Because I think, you know, there's a lot that could be influenced at that stage. Thank you.
Yes, we have. We have a strategic partnerships team that dock into that geography that I've just described. As you might imagine, with all the NHS changes and the local government changes happening simultaneously, they are quite busy at the moment. So, you know, one of the things that I think we all around this table, you represent constituencies of interest of different types, is to hear back from you all about how it feels from your perspectives, as well as, because we will miss something, because, you know, we have to cover a vast geography. I could literally spend my entire life shuttling from one meeting to the next if I so chose to. You're absolutely right. It's probably one of the biggest strategic risks that we've got, this transition, and its simultaneous nature. So I look forward to, I'm very happy to come back on that in future meetings.
Thank you for raising that very important issue. But Martin, you wanted to come in on this?
Yes, I mean, it's an opportunity and a threat, isn't it, with reorganisation, because it's built-in complexity. Whereas having to, on the social services side in Surrey, for example, having to deal with one county council, you're not going to have to deal in effect with two two unitary authorities. You know, given that the 70% of the county council's budget is social services, and knowing about the calls that we get from care homes and stuff like that. So I suppose my first question is there any kind of plan to up the resource that deals with the interfaces, because you're going to have a lot more interfaces to interface with? Sorry about the English. And the second thing is, because I have a little bit of an insight into what's going on in Surrey, there's going to be, as you say, a big risk of eyes going off balls from the council's point of view, because absolutely everyone who works for the 13 district councils in Surrey and the Surrey County Council is going to have to go through a job relocation, not necessarily physically, but, you know, a job evaluation, etc., HR process. And as we know, I mean, that is something that tends to become first and foremost into people's minds when their own particular position is uncertain.
Yep, you're absolutely right. It's the threat to people's livelihoods that causes the lack of focus. That's the brutal truth of it, because people worry about their jobs. Why wouldn't they? The truth is, we're going to have to be quite targeted in where we want to try and make a difference. So linking the 2 points together, your first question to the question you've just asked, in actual fact, we're going to have to work in a very targeted way to achieve specific outcomes. We just don't have the resource to cover all the bases that we need. So a strategic priority for us in the year ahead will be to improve our virtual care response. That response leads us into a place of saying, what can we do internally? What do we require partners to help us with? And it goes back to the thing that you said, we need more capacity. It's not just in health services that we need more capacity. We need more capacity in the social care domain as well. So we're going to have to be quite targeted in where we go after some of these asks and some of our offers. Because, as I said, the reality is the change is so all-encompassing, we would not be able to do it all as it is. And that is just a brute fact. I could double the size of the strategic partnership team overnight, and we still wouldn't be able to get our arms around all of it.
Okay, if we're in the interest of time, could we now move on, and I'll invite Karen to introduce the report from the Patient Quality Committee, please.
Thank you, Mike. said, we took a great deal of hope from that, but it did also highlight, as we've touched on earlier, some differences between the different pathways in our respective organisations as we come together with SCAS, but that's giving us opportunities to look at how we try and iron some of those out and work together on those. Linked in with that then is the move towards virtual care. Again, I think we've spoken quite a lot about that this morning. You'll notice the phrase in the report that this does remain stubbornly below target, but there are some green shoots in there on what we're doing to walk towards those. It is quite a big change and a big shift, both in terms of how the care are delivered, but also some of the dependencies on things like IT that we're also reliant on. And the other area in terms of alert is the models of care themselves. And again, I think we've touched on that and how we're delivering and beginning to shift the ways in which people work. One of the things that we spent some time on in the meeting which raised concern for us, and this is an example of one of the care pathways and what can happen, is for end-of-life care patients. And unfortunately, what seems to be happening is because some of these patients aren't able to access the care that they need, be it in the community or somewhere else at the end of their life, when they can't be cared for at home. Of course, people are calling an ambulance. And there does seem to be some correlation between that and perhaps some of the nursing homes where they're not, and the hospices in particular, where they've been making staff redundant and cutting back on services. And we seem to be picking up on that element of the care. Now, obviously, for the crews, this is not something we're going to refuse to do, but there are issues about how much of that is actually commissioned. So there needs to be a lot more work done in that space. So those were the alert items. Moving on to assurance, there's been some good work done on the electronic patient care record. And while we're talking about digital, Simon's also mentioned the good news about the CAD that's coming on stream. We've talked a lot about mental health this morning. One area of concern for the committee for some time has been around the care of suicidal patients. And there has been some improvement in that space there, and that's touched on in this particular element of the report. And then on the advisory components, just coming back from the committee, we look every time at all the different data that comes into us from the reports, complaints, incident reporting, and we triangulate those to try and look at what the main themes are. And the themes from this time, I've touched on the death and dying pathway as one area of concern. Medicine safety was another, and trauma was another. And we did have some fruitful discussions around what was being done to strengthen the learning from that, and also to do some more consistent collaboration with some of the partners. And then we usually have a good go through our risk report. And again, I think we're all pleased with the way that the risk register is coming on now. We're starting to look at risk appetite. And there seems to be a much stronger grip at all levels in terms of identifying what the risks are. And then we have a systematic way of going through those with the various people that come to present their reports to us. And last but not least, on health inequalities, this has been a major focus for the committee. There's a lot of work going on at the moment around trying to identify what these are, who's affected by them, and we had a helpful report back on the recent carrying out of a so-called maturity matrix on where we sit with that. And that's given a number of action plans for all the local areas on things that they need to do to try and get some more information and to develop more focused work on where the health inequalities are showing up. And more importantly, also themes that we're beginning to pull together as an organisation, and that will form the basis of some of our priority work for next year. I'll pause there, if I may, just to take any questions on what I've been through or other elements of the report that people may have read.
Thanks, Karen. That was really excellent. Thank you very much. Can I open it to questions, please? Peter.
Thanks, Chair. This is a general point about the reports, I suppose. I appreciate that these are board reports which are then presented to us, and that's that's fine, but it sometimes means that some of the terminology leaves those of us who, well, certainly in the public governor camp, find a bit mystifying. So just one that came up this morning in our pre-meeting under the alerts, which was that this aligns the alignment of the clinical models that is ongoing and overseen by the new integration committee, which needs to pick up how the system is driving pathways to ensure the left shift. Now, I wasn't familiar with the term left shift. Those other colleagues more attuned to NHS tell me that it's a term of art, but I thought it might be a reference to the Labour government. But so just if perhaps somebody could cast an eye, maybe, and if there are things like that that are a bit glaring, maybe somebody could just do a little adjustment. That's all.
Can I say no reflection on our executive and NED colleagues, but having worked for 35 years serving members of parliament, you certainly realised and were challenged if you didn't speak in plain English. I think it's a very well made point. I was struggling to know what that meant as well. So that if that gives you any consolation, I'd also say the NHS is quite self-indulgent, to be frank, on and it could do better. And I'd say this to all who work in the NHS. It's one of the big issues that comes out about communicating with people. They don't often understand some of this terminology, so we can do better on that. So thank you. Thank you.
Karen, I wonder if you'd just be kind enough to remind us which non-executives directors are now members of the standing members of the QPSC panel, please. Subcommittee, rather.
Yes, so it's myself, Liz obviously chairs it, and Modgan is also a member, and obviously her expertise lies in the medicines management field. I think I've got everyone. We're having new NEDs coming in. Richard, is there anyone I've forgotten on that? That's new.
No, that's correct, Helen.
Thank you.
Many thanks. Perhaps, Chair, we could just ask for a current list of which non-executives are sitting on which committees.
Andrew, yes, yeah, of course.
Thanks
we can
very much.
provide. Did we mention that isn't Subo on the patient committee? Did you say that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
yes, yeah. I knew that. So yes, Subo's moved over from People Committee onto the Quality and Patient Safety Committee as well. Yeah.
So perhaps Richard or someone could just distribute a current list. That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions, please, of Karen? A very comprehensive report. Okay.
May I just come back on Peter's point as well? I mean, Peter, I think that's an absolutely fair challenge, and I think we need to take that way and do something to it. On the left shift issue, my understanding of the term is it is about this move out from the acute sector and into the community. And in a way, I think our discussions this morning have reflected some of the challenges of that. And particularly around the need for, it's not just the shifting of the concepts and the principles, it's the shifting of the money. And I guess that's something that we're going to be looking at very closely with the commissioners over the coming year.
Thank you. Okay, can I just summarise to say that from the NEDs, in terms of the board holding the executive to account, on patient quality, we are assured. We recognise that more is needed to be done in virtual care and the performance of the hubs. But overall, we are confident that we are delivering a reasonable standards of care as reflected in CCAM's performance against national targets and more widely. That's not to say there isn't more to be done. There are clear opportunities out there in terms of alignment of clinical pathways and getting a much more simpler operating model, in my view, for patients. But to give the assurance to Council that my NED colleagues are very much focused on this, as is the executive going forward.
Can I just ask one question? Yeah, this will show my ignorance about exactly what the scope of clinical models is. But is, from what, well, we heard earlier on, that people at different grades in SCAS as opposed to CCAM can prescribe different sorts of medication and different sorts of treatment. Now, presumably, optimally, you would have a paramedic workforce across the whole collaboration that was as interchangeable as possible for whatever reason. Is that caught up in the work that's being done in terms of the collaborative discussions within the patient area? Because that's to do with the clinical side of it rather than, you know, is somebody paid this amount if they're that grade, which is a personnel type issue.
So the models of care and the workforce issues, I'll separate those 2 points out if I may. So we've defined in our strategy 11 models of care, of which 3 are priorities. The first is out of hospital cardiac arrest, improving survival rates. And just to remind everybody that CCAM has the best out of hospital cardiac survival rates in the country. The second, as Karen's already alluded to, is end-of-life care. That is a significant issue, and I would not want to understate it. It's the, personally, it's one I am very committed to because it's the one place that you don't get a second chance. You know, we get one chance to do right by people in that space, and there is evidence that there is, with the decline in hospice care, I'm just taking the opportunity of speaking to put my plug in for, we all need to think about that because it is an absolute challenge to do better in that space. And the third is care homes and making sure that we don't take people from care homes into hospital. There are 8 other models that we will talk about, we could talk about in other spaces and times. Your question then is how is the workforce being configured to meet those? So we've done the original analysis, the first level analysis, which shows that CCAM and SCAS have very divergent workforces. By that I mean we have considerably more job roles in our patch than SCAS do. So one of the things that we need to be thoughtful about, and this is the second stage of the clinical analysis that we're doing, is to look at the opportunities for sharing best practice across both organisations. And that will be a significant challenge and opportunity for the group to do that. In doing that, I want to be clear that this is not about levelling down. This is about levelling up. I'm looking at you, Frank, when I say that. We've got to make sure that we take the best of both across both. There is evidence that both organisations do things very well. No organisation does everything well. So what I hope that we would be presenting back in a future meeting is the opportunity to configure the workforce in such a way over time that we deliver improved benefits for patients. But that analysis has been done, Martin. There is more that we can do in that space.
Okay, unless there are any other questions, Karen has kindly agreed to speak about the People Committee. So I'm very grateful for you doing that, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I may, obviously Max, who was chairing the People Committee, he has moved on, and we do have a new non-exec director. Has that been formally announced? Michael, can we say that who's going to be chairing the People Committee in future, or
yes,
put you on the spot?
well, I would just say that the council has approved this, and it will be Harbinger. Yeah. He starts at the beginning of March. I'm seeing him next Monday, so I think he will be an excellent chair of the People Committee. It's very likely that he will also chair the People Committee at SCAS, so we get that cross exchange of views and perspective, which I think is going to be very important going forward. But you're right, Karen, so thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so we very much welcome that, and thanks to Max for his contributions in the past. So just moving on through the same format then, through Alert, Assure and Advise. So when the People Committee last met in January, I think many of you are familiar with the Volunteer Community Resilience Strategy, which has been through several drafts, and thank you for those of you that commented on that process. The committee recommended this strategy to the board for approval. It was felt to be a very clear and compelling strategy with tangible and realistic ambition, and subject to some amendments and appendices that hopefully is now going forward. I think the one note of caution that was flagged was we do need to be careful with volunteers that there isn't an element of mission creep, particularly if there are cuts in the service elsewhere, that we're very clear about the boundaries are about what is the role of volunteers and how that is very different from the people that are full-time employees. So I think the committee did ask to make sure that we have robust evaluation techniques in place so that we can monitor the impact of the strategy and all the various components, so that we can take assurance on the benefits that come out from that, and also pick up any risks if they should arise. The second area that we spent some time on was around looking at the data on the management of violence and aggression. Now, obviously, this is something that the committee is extremely concerned about. We were pleased to note that we're almost fully compliant now with the NHS violence reduction standards, with full compliance on track to be achieved by December 26. So there is some more work that's being done around there. Internal Audit are reviewing our compliance and aim to have their report available imminently, so hopefully we'll be able to bring you the outcome of that once that's known. I think the other thing I should say in this space was that many of you will know that we started our shadow board last year, where we have a range of voices from across the trust who we invite to comment on board papers and try and get more input from them about what they think about some of these issues. And this topic was something that was also very close to their heart. And I was extremely pleased to see a piece of work conducted by the Shadow Board, where they presented a paper to the last board meeting on this particular topic. And in fact, one of the members gave a very moving presentation about her own lived experience of being subject to violence, aggression whilst at work. So we're working hard now on some of the recommendations that came out of that report, which again gives us a slightly different frame on some of the other pieces of information that we were consolidating together. So we're going to keep these under close review, and we will be bringing further information back. This then tagged into the wider issue on our risk profile, which was work around health and safety. We have an update from the health and safety lead. Workforce risk has been a key area of focus, linking in with the workforce model. We looked at a number of health and safety risks, and the ones that came out of major concern were around musculoskeletal injuries, and issues to do with fire safety. We had a fairly robust discussion around those, both on where we're making progress and areas where we'd like to see further work done and seek further assurance. One of those on the fire safety was around where we rent estates from other suppliers, and then they're actually responsible for making sure the fire safety aspects are safe, and how that fits in with our contract monitoring. So there is going to be some further work done on that, just to make sure that we're meeting all the standards. The other area that we've touched on was appraisals, and I know this is something that we've discussed at COG before. They are improving significantly in recent months, but they're still below the trust target. But there have been some actions set to sustain improvement, and we're trying to get those back on track by the end of the year. On assurance, there's been a significant amount of work gone on to the People Services Improvement Plan. The workforce plan hasn't progressed quite as much as expected, but there is further work being done at the moment to try and bring that back on track. Unfortunately, there's been some turnover in the senior roles in the HR people department, so that's obviously slowed things down a little bit, but we're fairly confident that we're going to be getting some of those things back on track. And then we've also talked about the new operating model and the corporate restructures. Those are coming in. Obviously, there has been as one would expect as jobs are reviewed and new people come into post and some are leaving, and there's been some churn, that there is a frustration about communication. But I think we did take assurance from the significant work that's being done to try and address that. And again, what we're looking for is some evaluation programs so that we can monitor the impact of the new divisional structures and see how they're working in practice. So, but there are some very positive reports coming back from that, and we're confident that we're going in the right direction. And final note there on Sexual Safety Charter, again, where we are with that. And suffice to say, there's been an enormous amount of work still going on the whole issue of the culture of appropriate sexual conduct at work, etc., which remains a priority for the People Committee. Thank you. I'll pause and take questions.
Thank you, Karen. Again, very comprehensive. Can I ask questions? Paul, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. It's very good and detailed. I do want to do a small deep dive into the strategic workforce plan. And you said, it says in the report that it's not progressed as expected, but then you went on to say that you have assurance that it will get back on track. Given its strong link to virtual care and hear and treat, getting the right people in place, I just wondered if you could advise COG what gives you the confidence that it will get back on track. Thank you.
Karen, would you like to respond to that on behalf of the committee, and then I'll ask Simon to come in?
Yes, I mean, we've been working closely with Sarah, who's the HR director, on this, and I think we do have some seminars coming up with programs of work in place, which she was optimistic that we would be meeting the delivery of the plan to pull all of this together. I think the big piece of work is really around what the new workforce is going to look like, given the changes that we've got in the various operating models, because virtual care, for example, is one. So where do we need to go in terms of what the different roles are going to look like, the education that's needed to prepare these people for the roles, because there will be some really radical changes. And so in a way, as we're changing this, we're discovering more about the kind of workforce that needs to evolve. And that's also being influenced as well by the pressures out there in the community and the different kind of healthcare workforce overall. So it's a big conversation that's constantly changing. So yes, I can't, that probably doesn't give you all the reassurance you want. And I think we also, are keeping this very much in our purview because it's so much in flux.
Can I just say, from a NED perspective, I hope you heard from Karen and from me, we are certainly on this, so we're not letting it go, but I would thank you.
And so am I, to go for the three pot there. I'm also on this. So look, the key, going back to the top line question, the key thing that we're debating, which will be coming back around the end of March, is what is the future model of virtual care that we're going to go for? Because that actually predicts the workforce that you're going to need. Now, in very simple terms, there are two things that we need to grapple with. How much we're going to expand the virtual care workforce by, and that's going to be one of the big bets that we have to place as an organisation. We know that to achieve the breakthrough level of performance, we're going to have to significantly expand it. There are a number of questions that flow from that. What type of workforce? Is that paramedics? Is that nurses? What type of nurse? And so on and so forth. So that's where you get into the kind of detailed hard wiring. The second is the way in which they operate. We know that other ambulance services who are slightly ahead, nobody's got this cracked, this is a kind of big existential question for the ambulance service, would be that we're going to have to aggregate them for those who haven't seen, I would encourage you to go visit our call centre in Medway. That's probably the model of the future. We're going to have to work at scale. We've generally tended to provide these services locally, and that's for good reason. And so the other design principle is the trade-off between localism and scale. Both bring benefits. We're going to have to be much more concrete on that. And then the last thing to say, all of this kind of for discussion at the end of March, is what are our expectations in terms of productivity of those services as well. So what Karen's described is the work in flight, that the seminars that are building us towards the end of March to get to that place. And that's the big #1 transformation programme that we've got to try and get across in the year ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's a very good, and that certainly gives COG assurance. The mention of the seminars that are coming up during March is very important. Next week is Careers Week, which I think is a really, really important opportunity locally to work with organisations to invite institutions, colleges and so on into local make-ready centres to explain how the what CCAM really offers in terms of a rewarding career, social mobility within that, attracting the right demographic who can really make a difference to not just their lives, but of course other people's lives. So, I mean, it's next week, so it's you can't do anything that quickly, but maybe next year it could be something. Another organisation that I'm involved with, I'm a trustee for a charity, last year secured 32 new recruits out of the Careers Week. So I just mentioned that maybe for
I think that's an excellent point. And the truth is, I've started to define a kind of future-facing vision for the organisation. What does the ambulance service look like in 3 or 4 years' time? And I think there'll be 3 divisions probably. There'll be a virtual care division. That's the thing we're inventing at the moment. There'll be a field ops division, and there'll be a specialist division. And part of what we will need our educational providers to do is to start to help us design some of those things, because some of this doesn't exist. We don't have. What we've had up until now is clinicians who've moved into a virtual care space or equivalent, but not as a core competency, not as their foundation. And I think where we'll be in 3 years' time is saying virtual first, and virtual care will become a specialism in its own right, which will need new people and hopefully, as you say, interest new people in coming to be part of the organisation you might not have thought. I had one paramedic say to me recently, I'm not actually into the blood and guts, but I do want to, which I kid you not, there's a literal quote, but I do want to do the virtual care stuff. And so I think there are opportunities, as you say, in this space as well.
Thanks, Paul. That was a very interesting debate, and thank you for that contribution. Can I ask any other questions, please? Mark.
Thank you. I know this is a bit dry, but can you assure us that on the fire safety front, we're not just looking at consultants and landlords, we're taking into account our own behaviours in occupying our buildings and how we manage them? The reason I ask is I've supported some health and safety inspections lately, and there's some clear issues around how our people we use the building. And some of the things we put in place, for instance, most of us can't open that door to come back in this room if we go to the loo or the kitchen. So if we propped it open with a chair, which you often see around these buildings, that would be understandable. So how are we dealing with those things as well as the important external ones? Thank you.
Really good point. Actually, Karen, do you want to say anything in that?
Yes, I think what we did take assurance from was the way in which they'd set up much more consistent and robust audits of these areas. And it also the work that they're trying to do with the digital people to make sure we've got a proper system in place for recording all of these issues that need addressing. But I think that's a very fair challenge. And clearly, with the example that you've just given, we need to take some things away and have a look at them again. But I am encouraged by some of the progress that's been made by the reports that we've had. But I think, as with fire safety everywhere, it's a constant issue. It's not something you fix and then it gets better again. So we have to be hyper vigilant about this. And it's something that's certainly dear to my and other colleagues' heart because of the implications of this. Thank you.
Please, Martin.
Just a thought. I mean, talking about the changes to the workforce in the future and having far more virtual care and all the rest of it. What sort of communication to the paramedic students happens around this? Because, I mean, I can't speak for here, but back in my LAS days, one of the problems we had was you had programs like trauma and sort of sea ambulances shooting around London dealing with cardiac arrests and car crashes. And therefore, consequently, sometimes people came into the ambulance service with an expectation of doing emergency care rather than urgent care. And I just wonder, in terms of the cohort of student paramedics, how many of them are actually cognizant that maybe, if that's what they have in their minds when they come in, that might not be what the job spec is when they get here, or a few years' time it'll change to.
So I think that's a really good point. The answer is not enough of them are, if I'm blunt. That's actually a strategic part that comes back to the strategic workforce plan, because part of that is not just about planning our workforce, it's commissioning our providers. And our providers change at a slower rate than the service changes. You know, we've got to make these changes, Martin, in the next 3 years. That's the life cycle of a typical degree course. So the change that we need to make in real operational terms is absolutely rapid, but we are starting those conversations. So there are now simulations that take place in that. The earliest opportunity that we've got is actually something through the collaboration, where what we're doing now is we are hoping this year to implement new training software that's much more intelligent in terms of how call handlers, that will be the place that we put our foot in the toe in the water on this, how our call handlers are trained. And hopefully they will then get a much better experience of those training courses, which will allow them to stay with us, because one of the earliest places we lose people is in that kind of call centre environment, and it's the place we probably need to make the biggest difference. Just to reassure people, if the worst were to happen this morning, the doors automatically all unlock. I wouldn't want you to believe that you would be stuck in here. You would, the doors do free up if in the event of fire.
Simon, I'm very grateful for that assurance, actually. That's really good. Just to reply from my perspective to your point, I think you make a really good point. I mean, in previous executive experience, you really need to be careful with your graduate intake, because I remember, our publicity was come and work for us and you'll be working on the UN audit, or you'll be evaluating the effectiveness of Trident. Well, the most people who came in never got anywhere near that until about 4 or 5 years down track. So it's really, really important that when you are recruiting, your engagement with your graduate workforces, that you manage expectations. So I think your point is, as your business model changes, sorry to use that parlance, you need to be absolutely certain that people understand. And I think that's what Simon was saying, but it's a very good point that was made. Thank you. Yes, please.
I just wanted to add, particularly reflecting Karen's update and report, my own personal support for the volunteer strategy, and to say 2 things. One is a big thanks to Andrew and others, Lee, who contributed to the development of it. It's a better document for your input, so thank you. And to remind everybody that one of the reasons why the volunteers are so important to us and what they do is because of our patch being that kind of classic mix of urban and rural. In a fair percentage of cases, the first people on scene are our CFRs, and it just gives me an opportunity to remind everybody that's one of the reasons why this is important, because having people available to be on scene as quickly as they can be is absolutely the difference between life and death. But we've got to marry that with the point that Karen made about not taking away from the fact we still need to have a strong call service. But those communities in Crowborough and other places, they are essential to us delivering our strategy in the future. So I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon. But Matt, do you have a question, please? Thank you.
Yeah, please. So my question relates to employee relations cases and comes in two parts. So the first bit is some clarity. So in the report, there is some assurance given around the GRIP in terms of grievance cases. It says that the number of grievance cases remains high, but the process is improving. In BAF, I think it's 603, there's some, it kind of says, yeah, but there's organisational change going on that's impacting the people services team and is impacting capacity and capability. So some clarity there around the extent to which those high numbers of cases still are in GRIP. And the second part of my question is, the approach seems to be local resolution, and to what extent are the NEDs assured that that strategy is being communicated effectively on the ground and that colleagues understand what is required so that that kind of local resolution can take place effectively?
It's a question to the NEDs, and then I'll just make a comment. I'll ask Karen as well, but I'll make one and then I'll ask Simon to come and give you more detail. Two things about the structure of devolving responsibility to the local level. NEDs and the whole board fully support that. No doubt about it. It is what operates in most organisations. There is a strategy to support local managers to have the capability and feel supported that they can take the appropriate action, you know, in whatever that may be, or the dialogue that they have with people. Are we assured that all that training is having the impact that it should have? No, we're not yet, and I wouldn't really think to be so. Are we assured that there is an investment in that training? Yes, I am. And I think we need a bit more time for that to have an impact on the ground. But Karen, I didn't know if you wanted to come in that, and then I'll ask Simon to give a more detailed executive response.
Yes, I think there's a few areas I'd just like to touch on. So I think, during the last 18 months or so that I've been working in the organisation, I think I've seen a shift from a very early seminar I went to where there were quite a few of the local managers and people in the people department whose main ask was around further training and competence and development in terms of dealing with these difficult grievances. So that was one thing. What we're seeing coming through now is there is assurance that both the training and the development has been happening, and that managers are beginning to feel more confident in actually tackling those things locally, which is good to hear. Again, I think this is something that we'll have to make sure is sustained. The other is an attempt to move from a culture which was very much around the almost like the knee-jerk first response was to raise a formal grievance, to moving towards encouraging people to speak up and looking at alternatives to going straight into a full grievance. So lots of work going on in the mediation space, and I think that takes time to bed in, because people need to see the impact then of what happens when they do raise those concerns. Do they feel that they're being taken seriously? And I think there's evidence from some of the work we've got from the staff surveys, but also some of the other reports that come to us, is that is beginning to kick in. But I think some of that will take a while to filter down. And the other point I'd make is I think there's been an enormous amount of work done by the senior exec team, good work in the space about improving the relationship with our trade union colleagues. And again, these relationships take time to rebuild. But I think there is some very positive improvement in that space too, and a willingness to try to work with us on some of those issues.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Howard wanted to come in on that one, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, thanks. One of the points I would respond by saying that, as part of the overall empowerment that goes down as part of the divisional structure, I've always been keen to ensure that we have the governance and framework that goes alongside that empowerment, as you give staff more power to make decisions locally. And one of the things we have got scheduled as the internal audit program is to do once the divisional structure is embedded, to review that, including the governance structure and framework around that empowerment exercise.
Matt, did you want to come back just, and then I'll let Simon come in a minute?
No, that's fine,
Yeah.
thanks.
Can I say just one thing? I think it's a really good challenge. The one thing I'd say that I don't think we'll ever get is an absolute measure to say whether this is working or not. You know, so the obvious thing to say is we improve capability and the numbers go down. I'm not sure it will happen as easily as that. I think there's an issue around the quality of the engagement where something is arisen, and that the ability to feel supported and to move on from whatever that issue is. That's much more difficult to measure, I think, but certainly you try and get partly anecdotal assurance, but also by actually when the NEDs go out to make local visits, you know, that they can ask this question really, which I think is important.
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, and I think Karen hit the nail on the head in that one when she started talking about staff survey and actually measuring colleague sentiment. So I think there's, you know, on the one hand, we're provided with assurance in the reports in terms of the number of grievance cases, but I think the impact is truly felt by going out to colleagues and surveying there. So that's where I think the assurance comes from.
I think Karen gave an excellent answer. The only thing I would add, I think, is that CCAM and its predecessors, some of you around this table have been involved in the trust for a long time, but spent 20 odd years centralising, and you don't turn that around overnight. So I think the direction is absolutely right. This is what colleagues asked for, more devolved autonomy, more meaningful autonomy. It really goes live in early April. And then what we all need to do is to get behind it, continue to back it. Now, will the arc of history bend smoothly towards its greater goal? No, almost certainly not. Things will go well, things will go badly. What we need to do is not to, and sometimes this organisation maybe has done that, when things go wrong, its tendency has been to centralise. So we have to stick with this through good and through difficult times, in the belief that giving people more agency, more in their own story, is the right thing to do.
Excuse me. So I hope that start some good area which will continue going forward. This is an important development for CCAM. Any other questions in this particular Karen? Paul, please.
In the last couple of years, we've had an explosion of data. So we've got a lot more, we've got dashboards everywhere, we've got intelligent reports, we've got an award from NH England about data, right? So we can actually measure things an awful lot better at a much more local level, which is really helpful actually. So it actually identifies where there's areas of issue or not. That's not just on that topic, it's on virtually everything we do. And that's something which we should acknowledge over the last couple of years we've done really well at.
Okay, I will summarise this session. I hope Council is assured by the level of assurance, if I'm getting mix up my words here, that the non-executives are getting. I could summarise it by this way. When I first came to CCAM, people issues were considerable. It was a hierarchical organisation. A lot of people were not particularly happy. And I think what we have seen over the last couple of years is a real grip of this issue, and that people are beginning to feel more seriously engaged. There's numerous initiatives you can point to. You know, I think the people board, the shadow board that we've got is really, really powerful in terms of we are seeking to engage much more with the organisation. I think the change programme of moving to a more divisional structure is not without its challenges. It is a major change programme. We need to listen to people, and that's what I think the board is confident about. So at this point in time, I think CCAM is on a really positive trajectory, and that's the level of assurance that the NEDs have, but we will continue to challenge going forward. I'm conscious of time. We're running a little bit behind, but not much. I was proposing that we now have a 10-minute break. 10 minutes, what time should we come back?
15, 11:45?
Yes, so could people return at 11:45? We'll then deal with the one issue around sustainable partnership working, including finance, and then we'll move on to governor's business. But thank you for your contribution so far. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, we can now reconvene, and the final stage of the assurance reporting is from Finance Investment Committee, and apologies from Suzanne, but Howard has kindly agreed to introduce this report. So thank you, Howard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I go into the report itself, I just, from an overall financial position point of view, which we've sort of touched on, but just to confirm that, as you will have seen, we are on target to meet the plan. So that's £360 million of turnover and costs, and broadly matched, so pretty much break even. By way of context, that's about £1 million of income and cost per day. And that is in spite of a slight shortfall on the efficiency programme, so they're forecasting about 76% of the 10 million efficiency programme to be achieved, which is a pretty good result overall, but obviously a little bit short, and that will be made up by balance sheet provisions release. And the cash position is and will be around about £30 million, which is probably at the tight end, bearing in mind over the last few years we've hovered around sort of 40 million, just reducing slightly, but that's our sort of cash reserve that we're running with. Again, by way of context, that's probably just over a monthly payroll and a bit, basically, yeah. So the report, the alert items, the estate strategy, so we reviewed that and approved it for forwarding for approval by the board itself. So that will put us in a much better position overall. That included a review of the ACRPs or ARCPs, which are the ambulance response posts, community response posts, and the disposal programme, and the review of the procurement of the FM contract as well. So, yeah, that was a very good paper, and we approved that. Then we went into a number of business cases, which were all approved. Very solid business case for each of them. So the GRS migration, I'm not quite sure what GRS stands for, but it's the main staff scheduling dispatch system. So it's pretty fundamental system, and that's shifting it onto the cloud-based. And I was quite surprised to learn how much manual effort went into the current situation. So very pleased, therefore, to see that a lot of the amendments that were manual will become digital. So that will make hopefully some major efficiency savings from doing that. DCA replacement, which has been long trailed and is largely centrally funded. So that's some substantial number of MAN ambulances which are hopefully being delivered this month and next, bit by bit. So that'll hopefully make an improvement to our off-road, vehicle off-road rate, which has been an issue that you may be aware of. So we approved that. So that's a great step forward, again, in terms of the ambulances. The volunteering community resilience, which we've touched on already, a brilliant paper which we approved. Yeah, that was really excellent. And then finally, something that's been talked about for a long time and finally come together with a business case for the defibrillator replacement program, which is scheduled over a period of, I think, 3 years and will be done regionally. So there was a pretty robust procurement process, so we approved that as well. So from the assurance point of view, I've covered. So those were the main things I wanted to raise. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Howard. That's very, very clear. Before I open it to questions, I didn't know, Paul, from a digital perspective, I know there's the seminar for governors this afternoon, but did you want to say anything any more? You're the expert.
Yeah,
Nick.
no, we had a really great report from Nick and colleagues, and basically it's running green, but they've got so many different strands of work running at the same time that prioritising it and keeping on top of those priorities is always going to be a challenge, especially with new things coming up like new CADs with SCADs and things. But no, very impressed with the start that Nick and his team have made.
Assurance is great. Could I open it for questions? Martin and then Andrew. Okay, thank you.
I've got a couple of questions on different things, so I'll just do the first one first. And that's to do with the SIP, really, because there was, if I understand it, the underspend was 2.5 million, which against the 10 million target, which was covered by the usual things like delaying recruitment and balance sheet stuff I don't understand. And from what I understand was the forecast was that 60% of the savings would be recurrent. So I mean that's all, positive stuff. But what I'm not quite clear about is there's this underlying 10 million deficit, isn't there? So has any of that 10 million underlying deficit been eaten into, or are we still in the place that we start the new year with a 10 million underlying deficit? So that's essentially my first question, because I mean, what it says here in the finance report is the implications for 27-28 will be considerable if we don't achieve the 26-27 plan. And it's just a question of how much, if any, catch-up has got to be done on 25-26. Yes.
If you don't mind, normally Bernard would respond, but this has been discussed at board, and in the absence of our finance director or chief finance officer, I was going to ask Simon to give you a bit more detail on that, and then Howard to come in and give assurance on that.
So the answer is that I'll channel my own finance director here, but the answer is that we have improved the underlying position in year. So we started the year at about 12 million. We exit the year at about 9.4. So the as you can see, the underlying overdraft, so to speak, is reducing. I've already spoken on this. The challenge is, of course, in the year ahead, the underlying overdraft has to be reduced still further. And part of the feedback that we will get on our plan is, are we going far enough, fast enough? We've not yet seen that feedback. The challenge is to get back to balance within, at the moment, our trajectory would say over the next 3 years. So that's that. On the SIP, you're absolutely right. We've got a deliverable plan this year. So 26-27, and I've already, again, touched on this earlier, leads us into 27-28, and the two plans are being very deliberately joined up. So what do we have to do this year? We have to make about £13 million worth of SIPs to balance our budget. That's where we think we land at the moment. In so doing, obviously we need to get as many of those as recurrent as possible. That process is still live as we speak. We're about 2/3 of the way there, but we're aiming to obviously have that process concluded by the end of March. In overall terms, we're ahead of where we were last year in terms of planning, so that gives me some sense of confidence. I've also, but just for the sake of reducing any doubt on this, that is our plan. It does not assume that anything comes, any upside, if we were able to deliver it, would come out of benefits of the group. That's not assumed in the numbers I've just given you. So hopefully that gives you some sense of where we are structurally, but where we are in the year ahead. To deliver the plan, I keep circling back around this, it assumes that we not only take money out of the system, and the truth is there are no easy answers left in the NHS. You know, all of the debates are now difficult, which of course leads us back to the collaboration. One of the reasons why we're having the collaboration is because it allows us economically to aggregate at scale things we otherwise do at subscale at too local level. But the other key part of it is obviously the delivery of virtual care. So the transitioning of a workforce fundamentally oriented towards putting more ambulances out on the road to one that we don't have to do that. And it's nothing that's inconsistent with our strategy, but this year is the year we've got to try and really pull the lever on that. Final thing to say is we're not going to wait until 2/3 of the way through the year before we do our normally you would mark at the end of September, beginning of October about how you're doing. We're going to make that mark in the sand. Do we think we're going to deliver the plan at the end of June? Because the point about 27-28 is if we are not on track by the end of June, we would be able to, we will call it because we would need to course correct to position ourselves to be able to deliver 27-28. Where would that take us if that's where we were? We would be having to look, depending on where we were by then with the group, at some corporate cost savings to try and cut our cloth accordingly.
And to give you additional assurance, you know, these sorts of situations, regardless of the organisation, often have with it sometimes the risk of optimism bias. And that's really why I support what Simon is saying, you know, the review in June, we're not waiting. And also behind the scenes in private, the executive and the NEDs have had quite a lot of discussion about this. I would support what Simon has said. It's really ambitious, not going to be done easily. But what I'm encouraged by is the executive team are ambitious and want to deliver on this, and I think they have the skills to do it. So I think we are assured in that space. But Howard, I don't know if you wanted to add any.
Yeah, the underlying shortfall, you say, has reduced. And my understanding is, as part of the plan we've submitted, that income to help that has been agreed. So the fact that it's reduced is clearly very helpful, but that's enabled us to put in a plan that meets the target because that extra income has been agreed. That's my understanding. Thanks.
So it seems we've got the bank manager on side, but they may not always be on side. We'll see where we get to. Right. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Andrew, please.
Thank you. Firstly, could I just say how I think all volunteers greatly approve and are very grateful for the volunteer and community resilience strategy, and particularly the, from memory, £328,000 that you've approved for the introduction of EPCR rather than paper for community first responders and emergency responders across the trust, either in the form of the light version of the EPCR, which would be on the phones that are currently used, or through iPad issue. So very grateful for that support, and I think that will enable much more efficiency, and therefore that will lead to better patient care. So it's a really helpful one. My second, my question actually is about the collaboration that CCAM, SCAS, SWAS, LAS and East of England, I think those are the five.
SASC.
Oh, SASC. Oh, is that what it's called? The Southern Collaborative. Is that
Southern Ambulance Services Collaboration.
There we are. Thank you, Simon. I wondered whether that is we're seeing any benefits from that work. I know there were quite a number of anecdotal stories at its formation about the ECG dots, for example, and the wide variance in price. Are we actually managing to realise any of those savings now?
So maybe I should answer that because I chair the collaboration on behalf of the Chief Executive. So there are 3 programmes of work this year. The first is in procurement, and the answer is, in short, yes, we are starting to see benefits. There is further that we need to go in this space, and the further is about our appetite for consolidating procurement more structurally across the five of us. We have started a progress of managed convergence in the digital space. I would expect in the next 2 to 3 years to have a much more consolidated digital footprint. The CDIOs now all regular, so procurement is one, CDIOs all regularly meet together and have got quite an ambitious program of development ranging from cybersecurity through to something, I'll do the acronym AVT, which is called Ambient Voice Technology, which means transcribing of clinicians in real time, which I think is going to be hugely important to us. Goes back to the point about virtual care. You increase productivity in direct proportion to the reduction in time that you ask a clinician to write up notes. That's the key point to make. The third area where we're working is in productivity. Although we all measure the same things, we measure them very differently. And we need to start, I expect there'll be a lot of national challenge in the ambulance sector, to the ambulance sector, about how productive we are being, and a much more assertive use of league tables to compare Trust A with Trust B and so on. So we think that we need to get our own house in order to start counting things in a consistent and similar way. There is considerable evidence to support the fact that although the output that you see is reported commonly, the input is not constructed commonly. So those are the three areas that I think we will be trying to make progress on in the year ahead.
Many thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Other questions? Peter.
Right, so if you wouldn't mind, just to go back to the SIP for a moment. Howard said it was 76% achieved, and I think he described that as a slight underachievement. And I mean, the message is always at the beginning of the year, this is the target, we have to get it. So only achieving 76% in other contexts could be immensely disappointing. And I just trying to get an impression about which one it was. Was it really that we thought we'd only get 80%, so 76% is really good news? But if we got 100%, of course, the year-end position would have been much, much better. So just sort of tell us what the overall view of that achievement or not is.
Howard, do you want to say anything? Then or Simon or I can come in.
Yeah, I mean, it was always a stretch. We knew it was a stretch. It would have been nice to get 100%, and it's still an estimate. We're not quite there yet. But yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's £2.5 million shortfall against the 10 million, which causes a problem for next year, but we're able to fill that sort of size number. When you consider the effort that has gone in to the many individual schemes and the consideration about the patient impact of those schemes, i.e. that there's no harm arising from the savings that are being made, there's always a balance to be achieved there. And I think it's not an unreasonable balance. Yes, of course, we would have liked to have done better, but I think achieving 76% or thereabouts, might even a little bit more, is not a bad result. It would be nice to be better, but it's not bad.
Can I give you my perspective? And I would agree with what Howard said. So I think it was very challenging. I'm always the NHS way of managing. So I'm allowed to say this. Managing money is beggars belief. To be honest, I'll be careful what I say. But to go on realising this level of efficiency year on, year out is not that easy. That's why the group model, I think, provides real opportunities. The only other thing I'd say is a human dimension element here. A lot depends on the quality of your finance director, and I think the finance director at at CCAM is excellent. You know what Simon Bell does and what he brings to this. So you've got to empower him to form the right decisions, working with the clinical director so that you minimise the adverse impact on patient safety. And I think that's what he's done very well. So I think 76, 77% or whatever it is a good outcome for CCAM. It's better than I thought they would achieve, if I'm really honest with you. And that's, you know, I've been critical of NHS financing. I don't think you can constantly be expecting that level of efficiency over and over again every year. Why don't you just cut the budget if that's what you're saying? But we don't do it that way. And that's why moving forward to the group model, I think, is really, really important. Having denigrated NHS accounting, do you want to come in and retrieve the situation?
So I think we obviously look at debates through individual silos, but I think the way to frame this, before I say a couple of other things, is do we think when we consider patient delivery, so response times, the quality of services and the efficiency, you have to look. One of the debates I had with the board at the beginning of the year is it's not enough just to look at things through one's lens. The trick is balancing those three parts of the triangle and making sure we are assured as a board that we are delivering in all three. It's very easy to take money out of an organisation, and the NHS is actually littered with case examples where people have gone too aggressively after the money and suffered as a consequence in terms of either delivery or quality of services. And I think probably what you've got from this morning's debate, I hope, Peter, is a sense that we've managed that balance.
Yeah.
And that balance involves trade-offs. And the trade-offs sometimes come, have we pushed as far as we can on the SIPs? And if we pushed further, would we impact patient delivery or quality of service? Those are the debates that we have as a board. And I'm confident that we've struck the right balance. The second level of assurance I think I can give you is I'm not reporting to you that we're in regulatory distress as a result of our delivery on the financial system. So you can feel a degree of assurance in that regard too. The third thing, and it's just to amplify really what Michael has said, we cannot carry on salami slicing our way to victory, as it were. We are going to need a fundamental reset of the construct if we're going to maintain the tension between delivery and efficiency, particularly in the context of demand that is rising still quite rapidly. And that's why we keep on talking, Michael and I, about the collaboration of the group model, because we are going to have to look at aggregation of some services that currently are done twice, that will have to, in future, be done once. Digital is a very good example of that. We are not sufficiently large scale that we can carry on investing in services that we've got at the moment. And that is the only real way to take cash out, going back to the 76% sustainably. You have to start to make those hardcore decisions. The last thing I'd say about our plan, we still have a deliverable plan. And the thing that Simon said to the board, Simon Bell said to the board, was he is confident that we can deliver this plan, and I am too. That is not to say that it is easy, but we still believe it's deliverable. That's for the year ahead.
That's enormously helpful, and in a sense that's what I thought. Again, it comes back to the papers and maybe putting more of that context in, because they're public documents, and a bold statement of only 76% achievement, but add the context and it makes sense. So just again a thought about how those papers are.
I think that's a very valid comment. Really, the context is incredible. But let's reflect on that and see what we can do going forward. But thank you, Paul. I thought at one point you were going to come in. Did you want to say something?
I think the other thing is the processes behind how the SIP is managed. They're really detailed. So we get everything. We get a very detailed pack that Simon and Juliet put together. Each of the 50 or 60 schemes are RAG rated and reported on. You know, so it's very rigorous, actually, and the people obviously care an awful lot about it. You know, so there's nothing, it's very transparent, but the processes behind it are very strong, actually, and that they might help us when it comes to further savings in other areas. So the finance team have really stepped up, and so has the organisation, to look at this area.
Martin, you wanted to come back?
Could I ask a question about the vehicle off-road? I mean, I think it's sort of somewhere around about 16% and they're against a target of 10. And my understanding is that the ambition is that when the manned vehicles come in, the first step is that we'll go down to just under 14. I mean, I suppose the question is, what's the sort of confidence level about how fast that I mean, it's not high compared to Scouts, but you know that vehicle off road can come down to where it should be. I mean, because obviously there's a lead in time with these manned vehicles coming along. We've still got Fiats, we've still got Fiat park problems and so on.
I have 2 points in relation to that. The one is we're developing our vehicles off road as a kind of it's one of those metrics that often gets talked about, and in actual fact it's a marker but not necessarily the key thing we need to focus on. The key thing I'll be asking people to start reporting on in the year ahead, Martin, is the number of people who are sitting on a station who we don't have a vehicle to go to. And that actually I think is a much more pertinent metric, because if we have nobody who is available to us without a vehicle, then at one level the VOR rate is not immaterial, but it's less fundamental. So I will be encouraging us to, in the jargon, it's going back to the jargon point, it's the ghost, it's the ghosts in our system, the ghost call signs. Because if we have lots of those, then that's a problem for us. And so I'll be shifting that debate moving forward. Not only is our vehicle off-road rate, the actual mechanical failure, relatively good, it's actually stacks up pretty well nationally. We are as confident as we can be in our manned suppliers. In fact, next week, I think, I'm off to Brighton to see the first of them arrive. So nothing like seeing things in the flesh to believe that they actually exist. Maybe that says more about me than it does about the delivery schedule. But we are confident that we're going to get some vehicles that actually will help us do better. And then I think there are some lessons to be learned about how we do better on some of these national exercises, because the VOR rate, which is obviously driven by some of our Fiat supply side problems, was a really good idea at one level, but the execution of it has not lived up to expectations. So that's probably what I'd say.
Thank you. Please.
No, first thing I'd say is I've been very heartened by what I've heard during the course of this morning's debate, both on the performance and on the financial side. I think should congratulate all the team for the performance over this year. My question is actually about mutual aid and the consequences of that. So I understand we would wish to help a neighbour for the public good, but how long does the mutual aid likely to go on, and what is the consequence on our patients and our performance as that process runs?
Yep, so what's being referred to there is the idea that we have provided mutual aid to SCAS throughout the winter. I would say that was absolutely the right thing to do, because patient safety trumps everything else. I will give some qualifications on it in a minute, but I couldn't sit in good conscience with a partner organisation struggling as significantly as SCAS were throughout the earlier part of this winter, us having an ability to do something and not doing it. That would just be fundamentally wrong in principle. I think, again, coming back to the collaboration has been a dominant theme of this conversation this morning, hasn't it? The qualifications I would give are it was relatively unplanned. In other words, it was reactive rather than planned. It did not, to be absolutely clear, impact us in terms of our ability to deliver services. So we didn't harm our ability to respond, but it's not a sustainable, nor is it a good way of planning services. So we need to think more thoughtfully. If that's going to be a feature of operating, how do we help each other out? We need to plan for that better going forward. But just to give COG the absolute assurance, I am assured that it did not impact negatively on patient safety. And I would still do it again tomorrow, because trying to make sure, you know, all of us at one stage probably will, or our family will, need an ambulance. And, you know, SCAS were struggling. There is no question about it. And it was the right thing to do to try and help out. We also helped out with some of our fleet technicians to help them go and repair their ambulances. So it's not just about frontline crews, it's also about providing some of the ancillary support. And in actual fact, when you think about what we learned from that, resilience going forward, resilience cuts both ways. We could be tomorrow in trouble, and together we can do better together. I think that's the key thing. We can build stronger resilient systems together. But I take the point about let's be planful about it going forward if that's where we're going to end up.
Thank you. Can you just explain a little bit more about how it didn't impact on our performance then? Because that's the bit I don't understand and can't explain to anybody else at the moment. If we aren't hitting all our targets bang on, how does that
they
work?
purchased and paid for additional capacity from us in the two ways in which I've described. What we didn't compromise was the number of hours that we put out. If you look at the number of hours that we put out, it was actually in excess of plan. So I'm confident to be able to say that we met our predicted demand, which we're pretty good at predicting actually, with the hours that we need to. There are other more detailed issues that we would need to get into going forward, but just again, to be clear, we did not compromise, we did not dip below the levels of hours on the road that we should have done.
Okay, unless there are other questions, I'm going to bring to a conclusion this part of the meeting. Try to summarise at each one. So I think where we are, well, certainly the board and the NEDs are, is we are assured around the financial performance of CCAM and also the financial plans that we have put in place, or the executive put in place going forward. And it's not just financial planning in isolation, it's financial planning in terms of delivering outcomes and services for patients, and we are assured in that space. It is not without risk. That risk needs to be managed, but I'm confident that we will take that forward effectively. One of you was kind enough to comment on the quality of the executive, particularly the work that's been done in finance. My observation, and I've been in my executive career, had opportunity to comment and look at and evaluate executive teams across the wider public sector. My observation was more than an observation. My strong conviction is that CCAM has a very effective executive team, and I think that puts us in a strong position as we move forward with the group structure. So I wanted to conclude with that item. If I now move on to governance, and the first item under governance is the Council's agreement to the appointment of the lead and deputy lead governor for the next, is it 12 months? Or 2 years. For the next 2 years. I'm really, really grateful that Andrew has agreed to continue as the lead with Peter as his deputy. Not to share their blushes, I've been exceptionally grateful for the support that they have given me, and I know Simon is of the same view. It goes wider than that. I think more generally their commitment to CCAM and the services that we provide for communities in the South East. So I'd ask you to endorse that decision to make Andrew to continue as lead governor for the next 2 years with Peter as his deputy. Unless I hear anything to the contrary, I will take that as a decision by the council. Yeah. So thank you both very much indeed. We're very grateful. I know you don't get paid for this, so I'm really grateful. So thank you very much for your service. Thank you. So I now hand over to Andrew to talk about Governor Membership Development Committee and the Governor Activities and Queries report.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Council for their approval of our reappointment. It's a huge privilege to continue to serve the Trust and the Council of Governors and the people we serve, so thank you. Very humbling. The Governor and Membership Development Committee report is before you, but I wanted to highlight one point, if I may, and that is that a decision has been taken that the annual members' meeting will now be a virtual meeting in the year ahead. I think that is absolutely the right decision. There's a huge cost, hard cost in terms of the hiring of the suitable building, etc. Then there's all the hidden cost of all of the staff activity that's required to pull the whole thing together for what is quite a small level of public benefit, insofar as the numbers of members of the public that attend that event is quite low, and the amount of cost and the senior people that are all attending, if you take that soft cost into account, it runs into many tens of thousands of pounds, I'd suggest. So I think that's the right decision, Chair. I think the Council are supportive of that. We'll give it a run this year and see how that works. Hopefully we'll engage with more members of the public for the report, and I think an opportunity to make that using some perhaps of the board stories and some of the other activities that the Trust has recorded from members of the public and their experience, from members of the staff and their experience, and presenting those to people in a different way for the future will be of great benefit. So I think we're, I don't know whether we've got to agree that, but I mean, that is, I think, where we are.
That seems eminently sensible, unless anybody wishes to comment on that. Okay, thank
There
you.
is obviously a statutory element to the annual members meeting, but that can be dealt with in a very quick and swift way, I think. So that was my main point, and I'll take any questions if anyone has them from the actual committee report. Thank you. Moving on then, if I may, to item 56, Governor Activities Report. I'm sorry we drive Richard completely bonkers here, insofar as we're not very good at communicating what we've been doing. And I think at the GDMC last time we were asked to be a little bit more open in our recording of what we've, as governors, have been doing. But before you do have the list of the ones that Richard knows about. So all governors around the table who weren't at the last GDMC, if you're doing something in relation to the Trust, whatever that might be, please drop Richard a note so that he can record it in that document. I've nothing to add there, Chair. But I do have just a couple of other points, if I may. At the starter meeting, Chair, you highlighted the attendance of non-executives at this meeting, and I think it's only right that I mention to you the irritation, to be frank, of the Council. 17 members of the Council have turned up today, none of whom are paid to do that, and 4 non-executives, including yourself, 2 of whom have undergone major surgery. Great to see both Howard and Karen looking so incredibly well, and the NHS has done its stuff for you both. But there you are. Howard is obviously, this is his last meeting, so I'll come back to that in just a second. But it is pretty poor, I think, Chair, that our statutory duty is to hold the non-executive directors to account, as you know, and for the non-executive directors to be represented by 4 keen stalwarts is really irritating beyond belief. And I think, you know, if non-executives regard the Council as a complete waste of time, which some of them clearly do, then maybe they just need reminding of our statutory responsibility to appoint them and also to hold them to account. People can't do that if they don't know who they are and they've never seen them and they never turn up. So I think the point's made, Chair, hopefully.
I share your concern, Andrew. We talked about it privately and I echoed that concern. I have to do non-executive director appraisals. We are doing 360-degree feedback. Those appraisals come to the council and the nominations committee, I think, and then the council. So we can discuss this further then. But
Thank you.
Thank you. I take it seriously.
So if I could just move to my last point, please. Firstly, I'd like to thank, on behalf of the council, Howard, for his stellar work over 6 years, I think, with the trust. Howard, I think you've added so much to the Finance Committee. Your huge background in all matters of finance have been a great benefit to the trust, and the council are extremely grateful for all the effort that you've put in and all the great insight that you've brought to both council meetings and to the board, I'm sure. So thank you very much indeed. And we wish you, of course, continued great health and every best wish for the future. Turning to Lee, if I may, my predecessor as League Governor, again, a very active supporter of the Trust, as Simon's already mentioned, in your role as the grand fromage of the team at Crowborough, with all the challenges that's currently facing with Crowborough Camp and all of that. You really have made a major contribution to the Trust in so many ways, Lee, and we'll be sorry to see you stand down as Governor, but thank you very much. And the last person I must just turn to is Simon. As many of you know, it's been announced that Simon will retire from the Trust on the 19th of April, and subject to that actually coming to fruition, which we hope it doesn't, I think it would be very fair to say, Simon, your contribution to the Trust is extraordinary. My association with CCAM and its forebears goes back for a few decades, and in that time I've seen some very competent chief executives and some not so competent chief executives. But what I have seen and had personal experience of is the way in which you've led the Trust, and you've moved the Trust from a pretty poor position to one of ascendancy and potential greatness. I think the council are extremely grateful on behalf of those we serve, our patients, that you have been with the Trust. We hope that might not be the 19th of April, might not be the date, but we live in hope and optimism for that. But on behalf of the council, Simon, there'll be, I'm sure, another opportunity to say a few words, but thank you so much for all you've done. I think you've represented us so well, both nationally and locally, and you brought a very real heart of humanity to the Trust. So thank you. Chair, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Very, very eloquent. I'm not going to ask Simon to comment because I don't like to preempt history, to build on your point. But I would echo your thanks to Howard and to Simon for all that they've achieved. So we've come to the end of this meeting. I just want to check any other business that any other questions that people want to raise. Okay. The only comment I would make, and I can't go too far on this, is that we are in the process of recruiting a new chair and a new chief executive. That continues. You may be aware that the first round of seeking to make an appointment to a new chair was not successful. We have extended this, and we are fairly confident now that we will have a number of candidates who potentially can be appointed, and that process continues with interviews towards I think in the last week of March. And then we are at the same time still underway with our recruitment of a new group chief executive. Those interviews will take place in the middle of April. We do have in place, for members of the public watching this, very strong transitional arrangements to ensure that patient care is still delivered to the standard that we have been able to do so in the past, and that that will continue, and that is a particular area of assurance that transitional arrangements are going to be effective. It's an area of assurance that the board and the non-executives are very much focused on. So I wanted to give that assurance to members of the public and also to CCAM people who may be observing this meeting. My final comment on this is that I think the group model, the group going forward, is an incredible opportunity to deliver benefits for patients as well as making better use of public money, which has been discussed at various stages of this morning's proceedings. I only say that because it's a real great opportunity for a future chair and a future executive. CCAM is a great place to work and, you know, across the ambulance sector more widely. So we are seeking to secure the best people possible to take this vision forward. So I just wanted to say that in the public domain. I just want to check from Richard, are there any questions from members of the public? No? Okay. Review of meeting effectiveness, please.
Thanks, Michael, if I may. We always have a really interesting and content-rich paper, the performance review, which sits on top of the three committee reports. But we don't get that paper presented, and therefore there's not an easy opportunity to ask questions on that. And I wonder if that's because unusually that paper doesn't have an author. And maybe for future meetings we might think about that paper also being introduced.
Okay.
Because there's lots of stuff in there, useful and interesting stuff that we might have observations or questions on.
Okay, can we take that away? I think it's really good. I mean, I tried at the very beginning to say and probably not very effectively, where our focus is, but I was conscious as you saying that because it's not just the individual reports, it's just some of them coming together that give you that overview. So let's take that away. Peter's away on leave at the moment, but we'll follow up. Okay, it's a very good point. Let's make that an action for the June council meeting. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, anything on meeting effectiveness? I hope everybody's had their say. Thank you for your contribution. It's a really rich contribution. We are very lucky here that governors, you all take your responsibilities very seriously, and your challenge is always constructive, for which I thank you very much. I think lunch is provided. There is a seminar, there's no private session this afternoon, but there is the seminar on digital and AI. I apologise, I can't be there this afternoon, but Paul is going to be there, and you've got more expertise in this space than me, so I'm sure you'll contribute well. So that's going to be a really interesting session. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.